if you want to place a bet on tonight's ELEAGUE Premier final between Astralis and FaZe, you can do so at EsportsPools. Now, for this final, first of all, it's a fantastic final on paper. Astralis generally always come and deliver in terms of best of three. They're very tough to put away. FaZe are clearly, I mean, the hottest team in the world would be the obvious way to describe them right now. They have won something ludicrous. Wasn't it something like 17, 18 maps in a row on LAN now? This is quite ridiculous. They're beating everyone. They're 2-0ing people, obviously, to get all these best of three victories since they're not dropping maps. But Astralis is not like a lot of the other teams they've played in those best of three. And so that's still an interesting factor because it feels like in that sense, for FaZe, Astralis are the final boss, the last team that they kind of need to beat to truly cement themselves as the clear number one team in the world and kind of potentially start an era. I mean, they're so dominant so far that if they can beat Astralis, yeah, they're already starting, like they're putting an era on the cards and they're looking very, very good right now. But Astralis looking in much better form than they have been in the last few tournaments in their first final since way back in early April. So everything is on the table so that no matter who wins, it actually looks like it'll be very momentous for esports history. Because if FaZe wins, perhaps this is going to be the start of a FaZe era, 2 big tournaments in a row, 2 tournaments without losing a map, potentially, if they were to 2-0 here, beating basically the best teams in the world on the way. Admittedly, some of them haven't been able to play them like SK and G2, but that's not the fault of FaZe. Then you've got to consider on the other side of the equation, if Astralis wins the final, well, all of a sudden, Astralis is back in the conversation as potential number one team in the world. They'll have halted this mighty FaZe team that looks custom built to beat teams like Astralis and all the other top teams, the SKs, the G2s of the world. Now we'll have to start saying, is there going to be a period where Astralis, without a roster change, rises back up and becomes the number one team again and now can start winning all these big tournaments and be very impressive? Even so, though, you have to look at the tournament so far, and they haven't had to beat any very good teams. They beat Fnatic, who's still a work in progress, very far from being an elite team, and they beat C9, who's good and looks solid, but hasn't yet shown that they're truly world-class and a potential event champion. Obviously would have meant a lot more if Astralis had beaten G2 in the semi-finals. Now then, when we look at this matchup, let's first of all consider the Astralis side of the equation, because I'm obviously favouring FaZe coming into this. So Astralis come in fantastically good on Overpass, best team in the world on that map. They continued their form yesterday, beat Cloud9 on it. Train, they're very good on as well, and that's kind of been one that's gone back in the map pool for them. Inferno, they thrashed Cloud9 on yesterday, but I still feel as though that is a map that's a weak point for them. They lost to this FaZe team on it. They got thrashed on it at ESL New York. They lost to Team Liquid on it at ESL New York. Team Liquid's a good Inferno team, but they're by no means gods on it. So I feel as though, Actually, I would say Team Liquid's like a top team on Inferno. But even so, this has been a shaky map at times for Astralis, one they have to consider. Mirage is a map they like, partly because it works so well for Glaive's calling style. They've got such clutch players in the sites on CT, players like Zipnik's Device as a mobile AWPer. This is arguably the map, along with Opus, he's at his best on. He's very, very good on this one. It seems to be the map where statistically he always dominates, but they lost it to Cloud9 yesterday. They lost it to Team Liquid before that, so they're on a losing streak there. We obviously know it's a strong map for FaZe, so that's a problem for Astralis. They like it, they're willing to play it, but they've also been losing a bunch of maps on it. They've lost 3 of their last 4. They lost to Gambit 4 maps ago on it, and they won against Team Liquid and Na'Vi were the last 2 wins out of their 5 games that they played. So not exactly the most convincing opponents, even though both teams are good Mirage teams overall. Cash is a map that's been surprisingly good for them, but they never tend to go into it. They tend to be forced to play that. Nuke's a map they can play, but no one really plays at the moment unless you're Virtus Pro. Top teams do not pick it, as I've got a video coming on soon. And when they last did play it, they lost to Fnatic. So I don't really know that anyone's looking at that saying that they're going to go ahead into Nuke. And they obviously do not play Cobble. They just do not play that map. So now let's look at the FaZe side of the equation in terms of the maps, and then we'll go into the pick band. So FaZe, obviously, when you're on this heater that they're on, they've barely lost. So of the 7 maps, they've only lost on 2 of them offline. They've lost on Train, which they lost to Gambit. They've won 1 out of 3 on Nuke, lost to Gambit and lost to Nip. Those obviously all 3 of these losses I'm talking about so far are from DreamHack Malmo, and they won against Envious in this tournament, but Envious is not a good team on Nuke on LAN. Online, they're very good. They don't play Cobble either, but they have been playing a little bit online. Then you have the other maps. So Cash, they only played once, but they played VP. VP's in terrible form. So here's the weird thing. Carrigan even said this in his interview after they beat Envious. The bizarre thing about this run, where they're in the final of their second straight tournament, is that they never end up having to play any of these other maps. Yeah, they had to play Nuke, but against Envious, a team they're much better than, and who isn't good on that map on LAN, even though they're good online. Then you look at all the other teams. All the other teams have actually directly allowed FaZe to always play their best map, Mirage. They've oftentimes allowed them to play or picked Mirage, and therefore FaZe gets to pick Inferno. So, for example, North picked Mirage. I think Team Liquid even picked Mirage against them. So they're allowed to then pick Inferno and get their second best map as well. And then teams have tried to force FaZe on an overpass, where obviously Team Liquid looked good against them in the final, but they've only played Cloud9, Team Liquid, and Envious on overpass. I think Team Liquid's a decent team on it. I think Cloud9's, they've got firepower, but that's not a great map for them. Envious, I don't think is a good overpass team overall. On LAN especially, they're kind of up and down. So they're not exactly great teams. I feel as overpass is still a weak point. So the bizarre thing is, the part that I'm having a real hard time figuring out for this one is, even though FaZe has been very dominant, and even though that win against North really did show a lot to me, because North played very well tactically, they didn't have the greatest firepower in that game, but they played pretty smart, and they had a lot of 1v1s, and they had a lot of site takes, so it was very impressive to me that FaZe was able to overall be a little bit more comprehensively better than them, and 2-0 them, but still, everyone's giving FaZe Mirage and Inferno, so if you can change the pick ban, I feel like you will start to see a lot more holes. Those two maps, they have nailed the fuck down. Overpass, they're decent on, but we haven't seen a world-class team play it yet. Obviously, we know Astralis plays Overpass and is the best in the world on it. Cash, no one really forces them to. Astralis probably not going to. Train, they actually look as though that is their weakest map, aside from Cobble, which they claim they're trying to play. But in interviews recently, it sounds as though they don't ever mention Train, so I'm suspicious about that one. We know Astralis is good on Train. Then you have Nuke. They claim they're playing it more. I think with their skill that it's going to be tough to beat them on Nuke, because if you pick Nuke into them, they can pick CT side. If they just get rolling with those fraggers, yeah, they can do a lot. With that said, bad map for Guardian. And then Cobalt, they're trying to claim they're going to float and play a little bit. That's the interesting part. So when we come into this pick ban, this is one of the most interesting pick bans I've actually ever seen in CSGO. Last time I saw one this good was when they played in the semi-finals of IM Sydney, and before that in the final of Star Series, also against Astralis, partly because both teams banned Cobble as their permaban. But both teams in these instances showed willingness to not do that. So at Star Series, off the top of my head, I believe that neither banned Cobble, but neither picked Cobble, therefore it just never was a factor. Then at Sydney, in the group stage, they played Cobble, and Astralis won on it, and Carrigan claims once Astralis started winning, he stopped calling strats to kind of bait them into it. Then Astralis decided to pick Cobble in the semi-finals of that tournament, lost it, and ended up losing the series 2-1. So the interesting factor, right as you come into this pick ban, is this. Will someone ban Cobble? Because there's a world in which they just both ban Cobble. There's also a world in which, I'd actually like to see this world personally, both float Cobble. They refuse to ban it because they know the other team isn't strong in it, but both say we're not going to be gimmicky and pick it because it is dangerous to pick it no matter who you are. And so we get a scenario like Star Series where neither ban it but neither pick it, and it's just not played. It's in a second ban rotation, probably I would guess by Astralis at that point in time. Or there's a world in which one of them bans the map and the other one doesn't. And if you had to guess who would ban it, you'd probably say Astralis. They're the ones who seem less likely to want to play it. First of all, because of the shenanigans in the past. Secondly, because they've just never made it work as much as they've tried to claim they would. So I think probably most likely is that Astralis will just ban it. But I would like to live in a world where if you're Astralis, you see how dominant FaZe has been and how good they've been when they get their maps, you actually just go ahead and say, I won't ban it. And I'll make you pick Cobble if you want, because I don't believe you're going to pick it. And that's a factor that I think is a thing. I think if Glaive wants to get ahead of Carrigan here, he says, listen, I'm willing for us both to just both to just float Cobble, not ban it, and both of us not to pick it. But you know what? If you're claiming you're going to play Cobble, I'm going to fucking call your bluff. I'm not going to ban it. Either you ban it, in which case I get an edge in the pick ban, and now I could ban a map like an Inferno or Mirage, or I don't ban it, you don't ban it, and then you claim you're going to pick it against me then. Have that as your map you're playing. I'm not good on it, but you know what? I'd rather you're picking Cobble against me than Mirage, Inferno maps at the moment. FaZe is near unbeatable on, and Astralis, it's in the middle of their map pool, and they can be up and down on those maps. So I actually think logically, I think that Glaive would be the smartest guy if he doesn't ban it in that scenario. Because Carrigan is famous for trying to get these edges in pick ban. And at the moment, when he has a very small map pool, some of his pick ban here, I believe, would be a bluff. Because he definitely wants to be picking Mirage and Inferno, in my opinion. So, there was an interview that Carrigan did after they played Envious, where he said that they hadn't done much preparing for ELEAGUE, but they had been improving their map pool, and he was talking about testing out the maps online. So he said they tested Cobblestone against Heroic and Nip. They made Nuke a little bit stronger. Cash is a little bit stronger. Then he just says, and we tried to slowly work on all the maps, so we're able to play any of the 7 maps, depending on what team we play. Do you notice a map he didn't mention? He didn't mention Train. So we know that they're really good on Mirage and Inferno. We know that they've played Overpass a lot, and that's kind of been the third map that's up there. No mention of Train. He's mentioned all 6 maps in the interview overall, and no Train. That's very telling, and it could be important for this, because of the fact that we know Astralis is good on it, and it's been a resurgent map for them. So, since we know in theory they don't mind playing Overpass, and we know that they don't want to play Train probably, and we know that they think they can make Astralis ban Cobble, or no one has to ban or pick Cobble, this is how FaZe can get ahead. I think the pick ban will probably go like this, because I notice in general Astralis is conservative in pick ban. In general, Carrigan, when he thinks he's got an edge, is willing to take gambles. This is what I think the pick ban will be. I think it will be Astralis ban Cobble, just get it out of the way. I think FaZe will ban Train. As I said, I think that's the one that secretly they haven't got figured out at all, and that's why they're just not even mentioning it. I think that it's good for Astralis right now, so get it out of the equation as well. Probably their second best map. Just get it out of there, and you're not going to be in trouble on it. It's a map that you have barely played, basically. You just played it and lost it to Gambit. Now I think after Train's gone, that Astralis picks Overpass. I think it's the obvious best map in the world for them. Rather, they're the best in the world on it. It is the best map for them. It's a map where Dupree and Device are both the hottest players at the moment in Astralis, the best players at the moment, and they are both fantastic on that map, as Dupree showed us against Fnatic, and pretty much every game he plays on the map, and as Device shows us every time he plays the map, basically. Now, if they do in fact pick pick Overpass, I think Astralis will win that map. I think they are the best team in the world. I'm not 100% convinced by the FaZe performance on that map. I think they're good on it, certainly, but I think they rely a lot actually on the CT side and winning 4 spies on T side, and I think Astralis is a team that's pretty suited to punish you when you're on the CT side of that map, and I think on the CT side that they're going to be a lot more conservative and play more as a team than some of the NA opponents that FaZe has played, and so the 4 spies won't work as much, in my opinion, on that particular map. Too many long ranges if you play it well. Now, I do think an interesting element of it is, on that map, we do have a factor that goes in FaZe's favour, which is in the past, when Guardian used to be in Na'Vi, not in the era of when he was in Na'Vi when Zeus wasn't there, because Guardian had his issues there and didn't look as good as he does now. But back when Guardian was on the Zeus Starix-led Na'Vi, they played Astralis many times on Overpass, and it was always close, because both of them were 2 of the great teams on Overpass, and actually Guardian being better than Device as an AWPer at the time was a big factor. Now, that was before Device started bringing in this scout the opponent's style of almost anti-stratting, countering a specific AWPer. So he didn't have that, but Guardian has a lot of confidence in that matchup from his history in that sense. So there's one little factor. Even so, I will say that Astralis, if they get to pick Overpass, will win that map. So we're going to a minimum of 3 maps, very likely, if I'm saying FaZe wins, right? Now, I think FaZe, in this world where they ban Train and Astralis bans Cobble, I think they are just going to pick Mirage. Now, the reasoning why is because they could go with Mirage or Inferno, their 2 best maps. But here's the logic. Okay, so on Mirage, they've just beaten North on it, who's a pretty good Mirage team, while Astralis lost to a C9 on it yesterday. So Astralis have a fresh loss on it. That makes you feel like you're very confident on it. You're already the best on it anyway, probably the best team in the world on it. I think that's a good pick. The other option is, you could say you pick Inferno because FaZe is also amazing on that map, while Astralis is up and down on it, and yes, they just thrashed C9 on it, but they've also had some key losses on it recently, and I would say are a little bit weak. So here's the thing. The way a lot of in-game leaders think is, I don't want a team that's just won heavily on a map, having confidence on that map. Meanwhile, they just lost on Mirage. So Mirage is better of the 2 anyway, probably. So I think FaZe will pick Mirage, and I will say that FaZe will win that map. I think they should. I think it will take some epic clutches from Xyp9x and Device, or some incredible AWPing from Device on T side. So I have to say, even though I've always thought that was a map that suited Astralis, it's never been their best map, and I do think actually that on that map, Force buys are very effective, and that CZ is deadly because of how you can get into the mid with it. So I think it's going to be really tough. And you remember that round where they ran out A actually from apartments and the ramp against North, who were on a full CT buy and just wrecked them with like 3 CZs. So I think that's a tough one to play FaZe on. I think FaZe wins that, and I think we go to a third map. So in this one first outcome, I'll put a couple of other ones. I think that in the second ban rotation, I think Astralis will ban Cash, just because in general they don't really like it. Nuke and Inferno are the maps remaining. I don't think they're going to ban Inferno personally. I would if I were them. I'd say let's play Cash or Nuke, because I feel like their maps aren't that strong for FaZe, but I feel like, thinking of how I've studied the mindset of Glaive and Astralis, I feel like they'll be more conservative and think, well, we know Inferno, we played it, and we did win it against Cloud9, we think we're good on it. So I think they'll gamble and play it, actually. So I think they'll ban Cash, which, even though I don't think FaZe is good on it yet, it is very risky versus aimers. I personally would like Astralis to consider playing it, but the options are as ban Nuke there. So then I think FaZe bans Nuke. They've got a lot of losses on it. I think Astralis is good enough on it to pressure them to ban it, even though I don't think Astralis necessarily want to play it. I think the decider goes to Inferno. This is also why FaZe bans Nuke, which I think both teams actually wouldn't mind playing, and I think is a fantastic map for FaZe. And based on what I've seen so far, listen, I think if you can get FaZe on those other maps, you can beat them. I do think they are beatable, even though they did impress me even more beating North, and I think they probably are the number one team right now, and I think they probably could start an era after this. I do still think they've only had to play a limited map pool. No one's been able to test them yet, but unfortunately that's because they haven't played teams like the SK Gamings of the world, the G2s of the world, that could have forced them to those other maps like Nuke, like Cash, etc. And so, unfortunately, I think Astralis actually doesn't have a great map pick ban here, at least in this first scenario, where I anticipate Astralis plays conservatively in the pick ban and Carrigan takes some gambles and edges it to himself. And I think he'll edge it to himself, and the FaZe will win 2-1, winning on their map, which will be Mirage. Astralis will win Overpass, and FaZe will win Inferno. Now, here's another scenario, which I also think is a possibility, which starts again with the premise, which I think will be the case, that Astralis will choose to ban Cobble. I think FaZe will. This is a potential other option. The other option is they ban Overpass themselves. Now, I don't think that makes as much sense, because they've been good on Overpass, they haven't been good on Train, and I think as soon as they ban Overpass, logically Astralis will pick Train. I still would favour Astralis to win their map, win on Train, even though we haven't really seen much of FaZe on it. Although, like I say, I think secretly it's their worst map. Then I think FaZe picks Mirage or Inferno again, and they win their map. I think actually we have the same second bans, and I think we end up on Decider Inferno, and I think FaZe still wins 2-1. So here's the other scenario that could happen. I'm not going to do any more than this. This would be my dream scenario to get the best match and to not have too much fuckery, is both do not ban Cobble. And Astralis should ban Inferno. FaZe should ban Overpass, in my opinion. That way, Astralis gets out a map they're weak on, they're very strong for the FaZe team. FaZe gets out a map that it's pretty sure for me that they're going to lose to Astralis, and they just gamble on Train that no one's seen much from them on. Astralis picks Train, which I would say they'll win, but even so, not a lot of scouting information against the guys from FaZe. FaZe then should pick Mirage, so I'm having a similar first couple of maps as the last setting, so I'll say FaZe wins Mirage, it's 1-1. Now here's what I would like to happen in the second ban rotation, thinking logically, is that at this point in time, since we don't want to play Cobble as the decider, now Astralis bans Cobble, now FaZe bans Nuke, and the decider is Cash, which Astralis knows how to play on the T side, and has won, for example, against SK Gaming. FaZe doesn't really play much, has played a little bit, but has the sick aimers on. I think that would be the best overall final. I think it would be a fantastic matchup, and I would love to see that happen, even though I don't think it will. I think the first scenario will happen. So the stylistic matchup, right? Astralis have strong grinding T-sides with really good trade play and fantastic utility usage to flush out terrorists and make sure they don't have to check every angle, even though they play a two-man game moving up the sites. So here's the thing. After seeing what Team Liquid were able to do with a similar style, I think they're kind of the NA version of Astralis. They actually did well on Overpass against FaZe in New York using this style. So I actually think, logically, Astralis is the best of this style. We saw Team Liquid have a little bit of success. North had some success with it. Astralis is the best overall and have the most extreme version of it. And I think that this actually suits them well to play against FaZe. So I think they have a good chance. It's the maps that are making it hard. Playing Mirage and Inferno against FaZe is going to be really, really tough. Another factor that goes in FaZe's favor is, so I say stylistically, Astralis have the style for it, but it's going to be tough. I think that the pistol round advantage goes heavily in FaZe's favour. They've won something ridiculous, like 20 out of the 26 pistol rounds they've played, or the last 26 they've played. So at the moment, they're outrageously good on pistol rounds, and they're good on force buys. So even if you were somehow to break them back after winning a pistol, they're very good on force buys. So that makes it real tough to win against them, and it means that their T side just never stops rolling. So, skill-wise, I do think before this tournament, I would have said it heavily favours FaZe. So let's start at the top. FaZe has the best player in the server in Nico. He's the best player in the game right now, at least comparable. I personally think it's Kenny S, but I guess that this week does kind of shake my faith a little bit in that. I think you can make a case for Simple, Cold Zero. It's actually a very open group at the moment, but of the players left in the tournament, Nico is the best player. With that said, Device is putting up MVP numbers so far, but not against the best level opponents. Neither have played godlike opponents, I'd say overall, considering they played North. I think it's a good team, actually. I think FaZe has played the slightly better opponents overall, even though Envious is much worse than the other teams. I'd say they're a wash with Fnatic. So, best player is going to be on FaZe's side. Overall skill factor, yes, goes over to FaZe because Olaf Meister had an amazing series yesterday and he was one of the players that was up and down because Guardian's playing pretty well because Nico's on fire. Rain actually chilled out but was godlike all the tournament and this tournament and the last tournament before that. Carrigan doesn't have to do much. Glaive isn't a bigger fragger. So the big issue here is Device versus Guardian, that's an interesting one. Device has shown us again and again the ability to get the better of certain AWPers, especially this type, but Guardian is a legendary AWPer. I really want to see that matchup. I also think that the whole factor that Rain did come down to earth last series, but then Olaf stepped up, shows that it's going to be tough to get FaZe in a situation where they don't have 3 players going off, because that's pretty much happened all the time so far. It just changes as to who the third player is most of the time. Astralis has really are up their level. Xyp9x had a great series yesterday against C9. Admittedly, C9, a team that made a lot of mistakes, and he capitalized on them. Devices look fantastic. Dupree's looking very good for the whole tournament. Kirby has still been underwhelming, but his form over the last couple of tournaments, the last one, this one rather earlier, was better. He was bad in New York. Overall, it's not as big an issue, but I do think they need him to be at least decent, at least an average level of where he's been over the last 2 or 3 months combined. He needs to be at least there because he does so much in terms of the entries. Otherwise, you're going to put more pressure on those guys who win clutches. Overall skill factor goes over to FaZe. Most of the factors generally go over to FaZe. I do think Astralis is equipped to beat them. I think they have a chance to, but I think FaZe is going to win this one 2-1. And I'm most actually interested to see what happens in the pick ban because that can where you throw a few of the wrinkles and really change up what that third map can be.